Welcome back to Call of the Father. This is the third episode, and I'm really enjoying doing this. I appreciate you listening, and I'm just very thankful for what's going on here. I just want to encourage people to heal and feel like this is my purpose. Something that I want to get into today has to do with healing and breaking generational cycles of trauma and abuse and just things going wrong. I kind of look at it and I see in society, in my family line, I've looked back and maybe I'll do something on it at some point, but I can see the trauma. I can see how my parents, I hate to say that they did the best they can because I do feel like they could have done better. They had a chance to break the cycle. They had a chance to be the ones, but in their bitterness, they got stuck in bitterness at some point, and in that it's hard to not hurt others when you're bitter. I believe there's always a feeling of, there's a vindictiveness, a lashing out, because of the pain that you feel. And when I look back, I see the generation before both of my parents, my grandparents. There were some pretty screwed up things that went on in that generation. And I mean, I don't know. I can't say that in some ways they didn't have it worse than me. It's just hard looking back at all this trauma, and nobody's healed it. Nobody's healed it up till now. And sometimes it feels like as I look at timelines of this family line, it feels like, it started with two people hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and they had children, the next generation, and that they had more children than they were, and then the next generation had more children than they were, and it keeps expanding and coming down to where we're at, and we're one of millions of descendants of two people. And it makes it feel a little bit, looking at it that way, it feels like you're a drop in a bucket. It feels like you're just one of many, and how am I to make a difference for many? But I want to present something that has been in my mind, that I want to flip that upside down, turn it inside out for you, and just give you a different perspective of it. If you take yourself, I really believe in a divine purpose, and I really believe everybody has a divine purpose. And it comes down to you. Maybe you're the one, and I'm going to go into why that is. Something I want to interject here before I get into that. Something happened years ago that it was crazy to me. I grew up very Christian, a lot of Christian beliefs, and thinking there's a lot of things around Christianity. Something happened when my daughter was really little. Different daughter than the one that I mentioned in the last episode. There's so many things I've learned from my kids, but one day my daughter was probably 2.5 or 3 years old, and I've always wanted to be a dad. I just felt love for my kids, and I wanted to do the best I could. We're confined to the belief systems that we've imprinted on our hearts as law, and we're operating under those programs and belief systems and things that we count as law in our heart, and that's all we have to work with, really. We are what we believe. And one day my daughter, she's 2.5 or 3, is playing with her and whatever was going on, and she looks at me and she smiles, and it was the warmest smile. And it was like everything stopped. Whatever we were doing, it was like, looked into my eyes, and she said, "I knew you would be my daddy." And it just stopped me in my tracks. It shocked me. I couldn't believe that she just said that. I didn't say anything. I didn't know it. It changed my life. There's a theory that we pick our circumstances here on earth. And when she said that, I'd never heard any of this. I'd never heard anything about theories that children pick their parents. Never heard any of that. All I'd heard or believed was what's taught in Christianity, and it's not that really. And that just changed my thinking. It was in my heart and in my soul after that. And when she said that, it was like she was saying that she knew of me before she was born. And she was telling me that she chose me, that she wanted me to be her daddy. And it was very humbling. At that point, keep in mind, I hadn't done any of the healing work that I've done now. And my self-esteem wasn't the highest. I wanted to do the best I could for my kids. But as far as feeling worthy, that just went over the top for me. Like, why would you pick me, little girl? There's so many people that probably would be more worthy or better, do better for you. I just felt like I'm nothing. And when she said that, it changed my life. And it opened my mind to the idea that maybe kids were, that there's a lot of stories about kids being conscious of things, saying things that where they were conscious of things before they were born. And just opened my mind to that. What if we picked this? What if we picked our circumstances and we came here to do something? So that ties into that divine purpose. I really believe that we came here to do something. And even if I was born into a situation that wasn't so good, there's a lot of hurt and pain and emotional abuse when I was a kid, and there's been some bitterness over it. You know, I couldn't be the one. You can't. I always say that you have to feel the pain to heal the pain. And I don't believe that I could be the one to break these generational cycles if I didn't experience the trauma. You have to be in the middle of it and experience that to be able to break that cycle, to be the one. Somehow you have to be in the middle of it. And as I look back and think of all the things I've seen my parents go through, like even my grandparents on both sides, I haven't even got into my mom yet. Oh my gosh, like the the train wreck that whole side of the family is. I'll get into it at some point, but there was a lot of trauma. And as much as I don't talk to my mom, it's not healthy for me, but I'm here to heal, and I'm here to honor her in that way by healing, even though it's an invisible thing. I can't be associated. I can't interact with her. It's a distraction to healing, and that's where I'm at. And it's the same with my dad. But I look at what my parents went through. They went through some crazy, horrific things. And I'll get into that more sometime. But I'm just going to say, like, it's understandable why they introduced so much trauma to me. They didn't know how to heal it. They're pretty lost. And as I look back generations and if we think about how we can feel like a drop in a bucket with the cycles of going back to two people, and there was a spark. They had two people procreated, and there's a divine spark, and it created a child, and that child had a chance to do something big, and there was a divine purpose. And there were several children in that generation. And then the next generation, they multiplied, and there are even more sparks of chances and divine purpose, and it multiplied down the road, down the line, and each generation there were more and more, and the population grew, and it got to us, and we're one of millions. And it can feel like we're just a drop in the bucket. We're just one of millions who are lost, and all of these cycles, all of these generations coming down the line have failed to break the trauma, break the cycles, and heal and make. So it feels like, as I look at society in general, and there are exceptions, and there's always exceptions, but as a generality, it feels like society is declining. It's degenerating. Each generation feels a little more degenerated. And one of the things that came to my mind is, as I looked at some numbers, I want to flip this inside out and just turn it inside out for you and make just a different point of view. If you take yourself, you're that divine spark, and you have a chance. You have a chance to be the one to heal all of this. You go back one generation, there were two people that made you. There were two people and they were the one in their generation. Each one of them were the one, and they didn't do it. And you go back another generation, and there were four. You have four grandparents, and each one of them had a chance. They were the one in their generation, and whatever happened, they were unable to do it. They didn't have the resources. I mean, there's room for some compassion here. They just didn't know what to do, and they failed. And you go back another generation, you had 8 great-grandparents, and none of them were able to heal this and set the generational cycles on a ascending trend. None of them were able to do that. It's been declining, going back 4 generations. And if we keep going back, each generation it doubles. There were 16 before that, and 32 before the generation before that, and 64 the generation before that. If you've ever seen the penny doubled for a month experiment, it's crazy. At some point, it becomes astronomical. And if I kind of did some math, I think each generation counts for about 25 years. I think people have kids in their mid-20s, and then their kids have kids in their mid-20s, and I think it's pretty fair to say each generation accounts for about 25 years. And if you go back 16 generations of this, basically it took 65,536 ancestors that each had a chance. They were the one in their generation. That many people were unable to do it. And so that's only about 400 years. 16 generations is 400 years. That's insane. Keep going back further than that. How do we do this? How do we heal? It comes down to you, and you have a chance. And I think we got to change our thinking a little bit, and we got to believe that, what if we picked this? What if we did pick this before we came? And yes, we've experienced that trauma. We've experienced the heartache and all these things that have been so painful. And we failed things, even in our lives, but it's not over yet. You have a chance. So I just want to encourage everybody to seek a healing path. Seek, how do I heal this? And shift your paradigm and think of each generation with compassion before you, that they were unable to do it. And there's a theory I've heard that our ancestors are counting on us to heal this, that it's coming back to they didn't heal, and somehow by us healing, we heal our ancestors, and that their souls are sitting there in some way unhealed, that somehow we heal them. And somebody said something like this to me at one point, and I wasn't ready for it. I kind of felt bitterness toward my ancestors. I was like, they're counting on me. Screw them. Like, they left this freaking mess for me, and it's gotten worse and worse, and it's horrible. Some of the things that the pain that I felt and even willingly face, that's the beauty of healing. You have to face the pain. You got to feel the pain to heal the pain. And yeah, I've willingly faced that pain trying to heal, and so many people are doing that. I think more and more people are doing it. There's some warriors in this generation, and I think that maybe we did pick this, and we came here to do this. Let's do it. If we look back at all those generations, that they didn't, I don't believe that they meant to hurt us. They just didn't know how to heal. And now I look at it like, out of 16 generations and 65,000 plus ancestors that couldn't do it, it's come down to me, and I have a divine purpose. And I believe I've failed at so many things in my life. In fact, I've failed at almost everything in my life has been a failure, but we learn from those. And one of my favorite, I love inspirational things. I love things that inspire. And my favorite commercial that I've ever seen in my life was a Michael Jordan commercial. It was a Nike. And he says in this commercial that he's missed over 9,000 shots in his career. And then he says, I've lost almost 300 games. And 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. And he says, over and over I've failed. And that's why I succeed. We got to believe that we are not our failures. Our failures are going to help us to know what the next thing is and how to overcome. Each one of us have our failures, and yeah, we can overcome. We got to flip a switch. Another thing that I want to bring up, and this is really the heart of this to me, in order to flip the paradigm and our thinking and our belief systems, I mentioned in the first episode that, like, in my life, my dad had used the Bible verse about children honor your parents, and there's just a whole way of thinking around that it's not just my family. I see it everywhere. It's a respect elders. There's been a lot of abuse to children by elders. I've heard so many stories. I heard a lady in a group that I was in talking about how even in a church setting, she was made to give elder people, she felt in her heart, she's a little kid, our heart doesn't lie to us. We have feelings, we honor those feelings if we're doing right, but she's forced by her parents to give some old guy, just for example, a hug that she felt a little creeped out by. She didn't feel that in her heart. And then I think that she even mentioned that at some point she was abused by somebody that her parents didn't know or trusted. And she's just one. I've heard so many stories where this respecting elders, not questioning authority, it's just led to abuse in a lot of ways. In my life, I'll reveal a little bit of the rebel in me. I don't know why it's in me. I do have some ideas, but I've always had this thing in me where if you tell me this is the system, this is the way that this is done, and there's no other way, I might be determined to find a better way. Or if I feel something's off, I've been pretty determined to find another way. And often I've seen where experience is touted as the end all trump. It trumps everything. And, when I was in high school, I decided my senior year, I'd never done anything, and I decided that I was going to run for student body, and I just wanted something to put on my college apps. And there was a kid in my grade, I was pretty good friends with him, and he'd always been in student body. Everybody knew he'd be the next student body president of the school, and it wasn't even a question. Everybody knew. He was built for it. He had the experience. He'd been doing that. He had the confidence. I didn't have that confidence, but I was talking to him one day and I was like, well, what do you think? Should I run for secretary or treasurer? Which one will have a better shot? And he kind of said, I don't know. I don't care. And kind of like he just really didn't care. And I remember just wanting to tease. I always had a sense of humor. I was just poking at him. It wasn't even a real thought. I was like, screw it. I think I'm just going to run for president. Literally was not a real thought. I was literally just teasing him. And he said, you couldn't do it. Oh my gosh, like that something flipped in me. And the next thing you know, I was running for student body president. And I actually beat him. In the end, his whole campaign was all about experience. Vote for experience. And I had my bullet points, and I said, just because you have experience doesn't mean you're going to do a good job. And just because someone else doesn't have experience doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing a fantastic job. We all have ideas in our hearts. And anyway, that was a big thing for me. I learned a lot from that. Here's another kind of funny one. One time I was working on this job, and there's a guy that I worked with. His name was Tony. He was a cool guy, but we both had a little bit of alpha in us and kind of button heads on how to do a certain task we were doing. And I said, let's do it this way. I had an idea and I knew it was better. And he goes, Eli, that's not my real name, by the way, obviously. He goes, Eli, I've been doing this for 3 years. I stopped, looked at him, and I said, you've been doing it wrong for 3 years. He laughed. We both kind of laughed. But how many times in society do you see things where we had our beliefs that this was the only way, and then somebody comes along and has a better idea? How could we grow and learn if we aren't able to accept new ideas? That's what we need to do with our children. I am looking at parents and kids, and even with my dad, there was a lot of do as I say. It was kind of like just a presumption that my experience is more important than you are as a person. My experience and my opinion matter more than your desire to figure this out for yourself. You don't matter. And so I heard a quote that said, somebody sent this to me, and it was perfect for this, but it said your parents say, if you don't treat me with respect, I won't treat you with respect. So if that's a demand, it's not earned. And then it said what that really meant is, if you don't treat me as an authority, I won't treat you as a person. And that's kind of sad. That's not, I just really think respect is put together a different way. And there was never any vulnerability with my dad. He was unwilling to admit anything that he'd failed at in his life. And I really think with our kids, I think one of the most important things we can do to help them be the next generation is to share our failures with them. Be open and share our failures. And it takes a little bit of humility, but I think humility is one of the most important pieces of integrity as well. How can you have integrity if you're not willing to admit where you've messed up and you're just putting on an image of being perfect? And so I've tried to do that with my kids, and I really feel like I feel like they respect that. And I also look at it like I try not to always tell them what to do. They have great minds, and they have the ability to come up with fresh answers that never crossed my mind or my heart. My oldest son, one day I was talking to him, and he had to change jobs because his job was ending, and he had an interview. And it was the first interview that ever came up after that job, and he said, so I have this job with a medical marijuana place. And in my mind, I wasn't really in favor of that. And I don't know. I had my own judgments about it, but I didn't say anything to him. I just kept it to myself. And I was like, oh, good, bud. And good for you. Let him make his own decision. He's an adult. And that's the whole goal. Let them be the one making, just bettering things. And I gotta say, it's been a couple of years, and he started the bottom rung as a bud tender, and I was kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. Hopefully he'll get his act together and figure out what he should do. I could have been like my own dad. My own dad would have been so judgmental and interjected so much of his opinion that it could have created shame and just like it'll never be good enough for him. That's a lot of what happened in my life. And I didn't do that to him. I just encouraged him and said, good job. He's making his way. He's going to make a living. He's going to figure it out. And over a couple years later, it's like, holy crap, he's climbed the ladder. The owner's talking about they're growing. They're about to double. And the owner is about to make him an executive of the company. They just love him. And I couldn't be more proud of this kid. And it's not because of me. I didn't have all the answers. I would have told him not to take the damn job. So I think we got to trust our kids. We got to trust that they can do better. So if we take this idea of trust or of respecting elders, is kind of like the idea, always do what they say. With my dad, it was kind of like, you do what I say to do better and be perfect, but somehow I could never be better than him. That's not allowed. He would never accept that. How could we possibly ever create an ascending cycle in our family line and healing in society in general if we're operating under that premise? You got to do exactly what I tell you and how I say because of respect for authority and elders. And you got to do it just like I say to be perfect, yet you can't be better than me. How can that possibly ever lend to an ascending cycle? If we can only do what they've fucked everything up along the way, the elders, our family line, they've screwed everything up along the way and they haven't fixed it. And we can only do what they say and we can't do better. How can it ever make a ascending trend? It can only be a degrading or degenerative cycle. I kind of embrace the opposite. I really hope and believe in my kids being better than me and doing better than me. I'm the one in my generation. I'm going to break this cycle, but my kids are going to take the baton and they're going to run. And I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to interject the lessons or I'm not going to interject my beliefs and constraints on them. I believe that they can do better. And I believe that that's how we can flip this paradigm and create an ascending cycle in society and in our family tree, instead of always respect your elders in a form of not questioning anything they say, but then at the same time maybe they don't want to share their failures. How can we learn and grow if we don't share our failures? If our parents didn't share our failures. My dad never wanted to admit that he'd done anything wrong in his life. But then I heard stories from my uncle and my grandpa, and then he'd act like he's perfect, always want to tell me what I should do and how I should do it. And I'm like, geez, I'm thinking, I've heard the stories, bud. You were kind of a fuck. And now you're acting like a completely different kind of fuck. And I just don't. He's been through a lot too, like I said, but I just want to do better. I want to stay humble and I want to give my kids a chance to do better without judgment. And it's hard sometimes. It's really hard not to judge and interject things. And my daughter was telling me a story the other day, something she's dealing with a teacher at school. And how she responded to the teacher, and I wanted to interject, and it came from this belief system where respect your elders. Well, elders need to respect children too. I really believe that we teach them respect by showing them respect and love and building them up. And when we build them up and we're humble, I believe then they learn to respect us. They respect that we've shared our failures, that we have been through it, and they respect that we respect their ability to do better. I think that's where they're going to get real respect for us. So before I get off of here, I want to share just a couple things. I really appreciate you listening. Please keep listening. I'm going to share some things in coming episodes. I don't know. I've got some great ideas, and I don't know when this one will be, but I got one that's going to be a vulnerability bombshell. Like I think it's something that I've dealt with. It has to do with sexuality, and it's something that I think other men have dealt with, but I have not heard anybody talk about this. It's pretty delicate, and it's vulnerable. I feel a little scared to share, to be honest. It's hard to put forth and just share, but I'm going to share it, and I think it might hit some people. It might help some people. Okay, another thing. This podcast is growing, and I really appreciate your support. I want to see it grow. I feel like this is my purpose. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I really appreciate if you give me a 5-star review if you feel that in your heart. If you feel it's worth 5 stars, please give me that. And leave a review if you'd like. I'd appreciate that as well. You can follow the show on those two platforms. If you hit follow, then it'll probably pop up each time when there's a new episode. And then on top of that, please tell others about it. Please tell other people. Help other people find resources that'll help them. You also have an option to send me a message on Apple and Spotify. It's on there. There's a link to send a message. If I'm helping you, or if this podcast is helping you, I really appreciate your encouragement. I want to hear how it's touched you. As far as sharing, I also want to share some other resources that I've found, and I've mentioned Lisa Romano before. Lisa A. Romano has the Breakdown to Breakthrough podcast. It's something I found on my healing journey and just helped me immensely. Like, really changed my life. Her Breakdown to Breakthrough podcast is amazing, and then she has courses that you can get into. She's got 3 of them. The Inner Child Breakdown or Breakthrough course. It's a 12-week course, and that one is just for healing trauma and kind of getting to the root of things. It's unbelievable. And then she has the master class, which is next, and that has to do with mastering your reality and figuring out how to perceive things in your brain. And then her 3rd class is Soul School, and Soul School kind of it gets into spirituality and some quantum physics, and it doesn't matter what you believe. It's a pretty amazing course. It'll just, I think it aids no matter what your belief systems are as far as religion or spirituality. It's an incredible course. Another person that I found more recently, but I really like the way that she breaks things down on the healing, and her story's crazy. It's obviously that she's done a lot of healing. Sarah Baldwin, Coach Sarah Baldwin, she has a podcast called You Make Sense, and she breaks things down, and she talks about parts work, and I haven't heard that before. Maybe she got it somewhere else, or maybe she came up with this, but it's incredible. It kind of relates to what I talked about in the last episode with my daughter, where I realize, and it's amazing on my healing journey how I found things. I feel like God's given me things before I found the resource. He's given me the idea, and then I found a resource that was already on that, and I'm like, it's just confirmation. It's amazing. But she talks about parts work and the idea that we're stunted where we experience trauma. And each person could be stunted in several areas at different ages. And we're going back to those those ages when we're triggered, and that stunted person, or part as she calls it, and trying to help them, like trying to overcome by just figuring out how to heal that. Anyway, I'll let you listen to her. She's amazing. And another one that I really love that I found recently, and just kind of inspiring and makes you think a little differently. It's kind of like that we've always thought what we thought, but it's the telepathy tapes. It's a podcast, the telepathy tapes, and it is investigating children with autism and their ability to kind of read minds. And I think it goes into scientific things that we just haven't discovered yet. And it sounds woo woo, but they did a lot of tests and it's pretty incredible. You might enjoy that. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate your support, and I'll be back.